In this video, we will talk about sets and set actions. This video is meant to provide a refresher on sets and also to showcase a few examples using set actions. Last year, I created a video to briefly introduce groups versus sets. I've also done an introduction to sets there, as well as provide more detailed comparison between groups and sets. If you're interested to learn more about this specific comparison, I've added a link in the card above and description below. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative and curious people. So last month has been a month of exploration for me. I think I've binge-watched quite a few classes, from how to draw cartoony humans, how to do urban sketching, how to use LumaFusion, and also drawing with Procreate. I'm sure there were at least a handful more topics I watched. I think that's the awesome part about Skillshare. There's a lot of variety. We can choose which ones we want to watch depending on what interests us at that point. And a lot of the classes are engaging, fun to watch, and designed to be digestible in a short period of time. You feel really accomplished after an hour, a couple hours of binge watching. If you're curious to see what topics might pique your interest, give it a try. The first 1,000 people to use the link on my description box or my code will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Let's start with understanding what sets are. Sets are essentially a way we can put related things or events or people together and analyze them in that light. One way to think about it could be being in a club. For example, there could be a guitar club or a band. We could be in this club or not. Maybe to be part of this club, we have to sign up, or we can sign up our friends one by one. In Tableau, this could be synonymous to what we call a static set. There could be a social media club. Either we are part of this club or we are not. Perhaps there is an automatic enrollment process for this club based on certain conditions, for example, reaching a certain number of views or accounts. In Tableau, this automatic process based on a condition can be synonymous to a dynamic set. The awesome thing about sets is we can look at the memberships and we can come up with questions that can help us understand our data more. For example, are there members of the guitar club who are also in the social media club? Perhaps if there is an upcoming concert, we can provide special invitations through the members' social media accounts. Or, who in the football club is not part of the guitar club? If we are trying to analyze and anticipate attendance, perhaps there's a greater chance that the people who are not part of the guitar club will not see the concert, but instead practice football instead. Hopefully those examples gave us a glimpse of what sets are and what we can do with them. If you have noticed, I've used a lot of circles in the previous slides. As they suggest, the notation of a set is 2 overlapping circles. We also call this a Venn diagram. However, to explain this, let's start with one circle first. This is significant because technically there are only 2 values in a set. Either you're in or you're out. This in and out is equivalent to true or false, which is what we call a Boolean value. This is going to be relevant later on, especially when we start using sets in calculations. Let's briefly demo how to create sets in Tableau. I am using the sample Superstore dataset in this demo. You can find this under the My Tableau repository, under Data Sources, the version, the language, and this is going to be that Excel file. One way to create a set is to create it from marks in a view. For example, let's create a simple scatter plot. Let's take sales, put that in columns. Let's take profit, put that in rows. Let's change the mark to a circle. And perhaps we're looking at customers. Let's put customer ID into detail. If we wanted to, we can create a set out of these marks. For example, if we select a few of them, as you hover over, in the tooltip, we can see that we can create a set from here. So let's try that out. So on the set, create a set, and notice that when we select marks from a view, the set that we create will be static, meaning it's not going to automatically change because it's based on our selection. If we need this to change, we have to go back into the set and make the appropriate changes. So let's click on OK. What we are going to see in the sidebar will be a brand new field that has that Venn diagram icon. We can also create a set by right-clicking on a field in the sidebar. For example, this customer ID field, we can either click on this drop-down or right-click. From Create, we can choose Set. Now notice the window that comes up. It looks very similar to the window that we see when we are creating our filters, when we drag a field onto the filter shelf. Now in here, we have a few choices. We can manually select values that we want to be in this set. We can also create sets based on certain condition, perhaps based on a field or a formula. We can also create a set based on top or bottom conditions. For example, in here, when I select by field, we can choose to select the top performers based on a certain field, or even the bottom performers based on a certain field. In addition, we could also type in our own formula. So with the General tab, we are creating a static set. With the condition as well as the top, we are creating dynamic sets. So let's try this out. Maybe the top 10 by profit. And let's click OK. Now the other thing about sets is we can do operations between two sets. For example, in here I have two of them. If I select both of them, I can right-click and I can create what's called a combined set. And these are our options for the resulting set. We can pull in all members from both sets, perhaps only shared members, maybe only ones that belong in one set but not the other. Also note in here that we can operate on two sets at a time. We should also note that when we are operating on two sets, those two sets have to come from the same dimension. For example, let's cancel from here. If I have another set based on customer name this time, so right-click, create a set based on customer name. Let's use top, maybe top 10 by profit as well. Let's click OK. If I select a customer name set and a customer ID set, I will not be able to combine them because they are coming from different dimensions. So for example, if I select customer ID set, right-click, notice in here, there is no option to create a combined set. The other question is, where can we place these sets? Well, we can place our sets wherever we can place our regular fields. For example, we can place them on filter, on our marks card, maybe on our rows or our columns. We can also technically place it in our pages if we wanted to, but there's only going to be two values. Remember that the default value that sets have will be in or out. So let's try this out. For example, this customer ID set, if I place that in columns, I get an in and an out. Put that in rows, same thing. If I put that in filter, again, there's only two values, in and out. We can also decide to place these in the properties of our marks cards. For example, if we wanted to have two colors, one for in and out, we have two sizes, in and out. You have two labels, in and out. Perhaps we need this in the detail. However, for our tooltip, we do require a single value. A lot of times, if there are multiple values, for example, category, when we drag that over to tooltip, what we are going to see is the aggregate function called adder. And what the adder function does is it returns a value of a star or an asterisk if there are multiple values. However, if the field that we placed on tooltip only has a single value, then it's going to return that value. For example, we only have a single country or region. We drag that over to tooltip, and we can see that the country or region, that's within the adder function. It returns United States because all of our data is based on United States. However, for a category, because we have three distinct categories, it is going to return a star. If we try to place a set onto a tooltip, we are going to get an error. Basically, in here, you can see that there's a red X mark, and it's basically telling us we can't put a set in a tooltip. And the other area where we can place our set is going to be in pages. However, in this case, we really just have two values. It's in and out. Now let's take a look at how we can use sets within calculated fields. So let's use one of the existing sets in here. For example, this customer ID set, let's display that. Let's also display our customer ID. So in here we can see 6 customer IDs that are inside the set and the rest of them outside the set. Let's create a simple calculated field. So in the sidebar, on the dropdown, let's create a calculated field. Let's call this in customer ID set. So in customer ID set. And the only thing we're going to do for now is simply display the set. I'm going to take this customer ID set and place that in my calculated field editor. And that's it. Let's click on OK right now and let us see what this displays. So drag this over to the rows. And what we can see is the ones that are in the set, they're giving a value of true. The ones outside the set, they have a value of false. We can see this in the data type as well. It is a true-false value or a Boolean value. Now, oftentimes, we want to evaluate whether something is in the set or outside the set. So oftentimes, we're going to put this in an if-else statement. So let's give this a try. Let's right-click on our calculated field. So right-click, edit. So a lot of times, we're going to place an if clause with our set value. And remember that this already gives us a true or false value. So we don't necessarily need to say where this is equal to true because that is already either true or false. After this, let's place then, and this will be our true condition. What do we want to happen when the condition is true? In this case, perhaps we're only going to display our customer ID. So let's put in our customer ID. We don't have to place an else clause. So after this, we can simply end the statement. So in here, end. I'm going to keep this calculated field window open. I'm simply going to click on apply because I want to show what happens in the background. So apply, and let's resize this a little bit. Move that to the side. So if it is true, we are displaying the customer ID. Because we don't have an else clause, automatically the result will be null. If we want an actual value, then we can place an else clause. For example, let's add in an else clause, and maybe in here we're going to put another string and say it's other. Again, let's click on apply, and this is what we get. Now, the significance of this is if, for example, we wanted to see our selection versus others. So let's close this calculated field editor. Let's remove some of our fields in our canvas, and I'm only going to leave the calculated field in the rows. Let's move other to the end, and maybe let's display our sales. So now all of a sudden, we see the breakdown of the ones that we have selected, and we can see this against all of the other values that we didn't select. Let's now move on to set actions. If you need a refresher on actions, I have an introductory video on actions if you are interested. I've put a link in the card above and description below. It is worthwhile noting that we have two things going on here. There is the set part, which is all about memberships, and then there is the action part. Actions in Tableau allow us to interact with our views or dashboards by clicking or selecting, hovering over our mouse pointer, or selecting from a menu. So with set actions, what it means is that when we select, hover, or choose from a menu, we can add or remove members to sets interactively. It's a little bit contradictory to what we said before when we were talking about static sets and how rigid they are. These sets that we're talking about are still technically static. However, the membership can be changed on the fly when used in tandem with actions. So why is this significant? Because it really helps in that interactivity and self-serve piece. As data consumers, we tend to come up with more questions as we are looking through our reports, our visuals, our dashboards. And wouldn't it be great if instead of having to ask our analyst to go back, make changes, if we can do this change ourselves and then get our answers? So let's jump back to Tableau and let's have a whirlwind tour of these actions. So back in Tableau, we can add actions at the worksheet level or the dashboard level. So in this case, I am in a worksheet, so I'm going to go to the worksheet menu at the top, actions, and from here we can add an action. So let's click on this. So what we're going to see is at the very end, there is an option to change set values. So let's select that. The window to adding a set action looks like this. So what do we have? We can add a name. We can also insert additional field values in the name. This will be especially helpful if we are using a menu. What else do we have? We also have source sheets. And in here, this is the place where we're going to do the actual action, where we're going to do either the hover, the select, or the menu. In here, there is also an option for single select only. And what this means is, after a single selection, that action is done. Whereas by default, if we control click, for example, several items, we consider that as still part of the same action. So we keep on adding additional members or removing additional members. We also have a target set. So the target set will be the set that we are influencing. Now, running the action, we can choose to either assign values to a set, add values to an existing set, or remove values from a set. And also, clearing the selection, what do we want to do? Do we want to keep the set values? Do we want to add all values back to the set or remove all values from the set? Now, what's worthwhile noting in here is under the source sheet, there are different items. By default right now, because I am on a worksheet, this is going to default to the worksheet. Or if I want this to be attached to a data source, which means it's going to affect my whole worksheet, everything that uses that same data source, I should select the data source. We will demo a lot of these options as we walk through the use cases. Now that we've had an overview of sets and set actions, let's look at some common use cases. The first one is a very common one, which is the drill down. So for this use case, let's start with our category on rows, our subcategory on rows, and perhaps we're going to put sales onto our text. Let's resize this a little bit. So let's say we don't always want to show our subcategory, but we want this to show interactively. So when our end users are clicking on a category, we might want to show this or drill down as a response to that click. We can do that with set actions. So let's start by creating a category set. We can right-click on category, create a set. We're going to leave this as a category set. And for now, let's choose just furniture. After this, let's create a calculated field. Remember that in our calculated field, we really just need our set name. So in here, let's click on the drop-down, create calculated field, and let's call this selected subcategory. So selected subcategory. So in here, all we're going to do is if category set, if it is selected, then we're going to display our subcategory, then subcategory. Otherwise, we can just leave this blank or empty string and then end. So let's click on apply and then OK. And let's display this selected subcategory. So drag that over. And we can see in here, remember that we've chosen furniture as a default. We can see that the subcategories for furniture are showing up, whereas all of the others are actually just empty strings. So all we really need to do in here is clean this up a little bit and then create our set action. So we're just going to remove this first. So let's remove subcategory. And again, this is what it's going to look like. So what we want to do is for the subcategory to show up only if our end users are clicking on category. So let's try to add this. So under worksheet actions, we're going to create a set action. So let's add an action to change set values. And in here, let's just call this category set action. And for now, we are going to leave this as a select on this source worksheet. And then now let's target our set. So on the drop down under sample superstore, it is going to be our category set. We're going to assign values to the set, but we're also going to remove all values from the set if we clear the selection. Click on that and click OK and OK. I'm also going to turn off the tooltip. Let's click OK. So now let's test this out. When I click on office supplies, it should now be the value in the set, and it should expand all the subcategories for office supplies. So clicking on office supplies, and it expands that. If you want a visual cue while you're testing out the set actions, we could also elect to show our set control. So in here, category set, on the drop down, we can show set. And in here, it tells us that the selection is office supplies. When I click on technology, you should be able to see that that option gets clicked right away or gets selected right away. So technology, and it switches over. When I press Control and select multiple categories, then all of those related subcategories should show up. So for example, Control and then Office Supplies. Now all of a sudden, you do have the subcategories for the two selected categories showing up in this view. Now a minor variation might be creating a bar chart. So let's pull in our sales, put that in our columns. And again, it's going to be the same thing. Let's deselect everything for now. And now we only have 3 bars, 1 per category. But at any point in time when we want to click on this, we can expand the values specific to that category. We can see all of the subtotals per subcategory. We can use the same strategy for different chart types. For example, in a tree map, let's place our sales onto size, category onto color, and let's display our selected subcategory into our label. So technically what should happen is if I click on technology, which is the red bar right now, it should give me the breakdown for technology. However, it's not going to work right away because remember that the action that we created was specific to a worksheet. So if we want this to be affected as well, then we're going to have to make an adjustment so that we are targeting our data source. So in here, let's go back to our worksheet, actions. Let's select this existing set action for category. Let's edit this. And instead of just the worksheet, our source sheet should be our data source. So in here, sample superstore. Okay. By default, it does select all of the worksheets I have and I don't want to target them all. That's why we're getting a warning. So let's correct that. So let's deselect everything first. And this time we're going to target only a couple of them. So we have drill down text and bar and drill down tree map. Let's click on OK now. And let's test this. So if I select technology now, it should give me the breakdown. If I select on the blue bar, it should give me the breakdown for that. If I select the orange bar or the orange area, it should give me all of the subcategory for that. Now let's also show the view toolbar so that we can select multiple of them by just dragging into an area. So under worksheet, show view toolbar, and I'm going to show this on hover. So we're going to see this toolbar on the top left and we can lasso different areas. So in here, select the lasso, and if I wanted to select both of them, we can see that both categories now have the breakdown. Let's try this for one more chart. In here, let's try to create a pie chart. Let's change the mark to a pie. Let's drag sales onto angle. Let's set the view to entire view, adjust the size a little bit. And this time, we're still going to put our category onto color. Same thing we've done with the tree map. We're simply going to get our calculated field and put that in label. So dragging this over onto label right now, maybe changing our border so it's a little bit more obvious. So in here, it's going to be like that. If we simply select one, it's only going to give us the portions for the selected category. Same thing for technology and same thing for furniture. One other slight variation might be putting this in color. So let's place our selected subcategory. Let's copy that. So control drag onto detail. And we're just going to place a secondary color. So in here, this detail is actually that icon right beside that pill is going to be a drop down. So if we select this as color, it will allow us to make some adjustments to the color variations of that one slice. If we wanted to drill down using a map, we can also do that. So let's start by creating a map. I'm going to double click on state. Let's change the mark to a filled map. Let's also display region into color. So if our intent is to show region first, what we need to do is to make sure we can map region. Because right now what's going to happen is if I remove state, it's basically going to be an empty map. So let's undo this. We can assign region a geographic role. So clicking on ABC and then to geographic role, we can essentially say that we can create the latitude and longitude values of region based on the underlying states. So in here, we're going to use create from. So create from, in here, state. So now when we remove state, we are still going to have a full map. Let's now create a region set. So right click, create, set, and for now, let's simply choose central. Let's click on OK. Let's also create our calculated field. So on the drop down, create calculated field. Let's call this selected region states. So in here, if the region, then state, and then end. Let's click OK. We also need to make sure that this is a geospatial field. So we are going to assign this the geographic role of region. So on the ABC icon, geographic role, we are going to create this from our region. And now let us place this in our label. So drag that over to our label. We can see that right away, our central is already broken down by the states. So now let's add our set action. Under worksheet, actions, let's create a change set values action. Let's call this our region set action. And we are going to target our region set. So on the drop down, select region set. Running the action will assign values to the set, and clearing the action will remove all values from set. And let's click OK. So let's try this out. If we click on West, we should be able to see all the states in the West. If we click on South, we should be able to see all the states in the South. If we select the lasso and select multiple states, we should be able to see the breakdown of all of the selected states. The second use case is proportional brushing. I find proportional brushing is sometimes hard to explain, but in my head, it sounds like brushing or painting differently the portion that meets a certain criteria. This is often used to show the share of something, very similar to part-to-whole relationships, and we often use pie charts and stack bar charts for proportional brushing. Let's build an example in Tableau. So for this example, let's use regions. Let's start by creating a set for regions. So right-click on the field, create a set. We're going to keep it as region set, and we're going to select central for now and click OK. Let's also display all of the regions at this point. So drag region onto columns, and then control drag, copy that over to text. Let's set this to entire view. Let's change the formatting of the text. So click on text, the ellipses, and in here, we're simply just going to make this a bigger font. Make that bold and perhaps different font. Okay, it's going to look like this. Let's change the alignment to center and center. And let's also now remove our header. So on the drop down of the region in our column shelf, we're going to uncheck show header. So for our demo, this would be good enough. We're going to keep it simple. Let's create another worksheet. And this time around, perhaps we are going to look at our subcategory. Let's pull in our sales. Let's sort this. And in here, we may just want to know what portion is being attributed to the selected regions that we have. So in here, we can simply take our region set and put that in color. So right now we have one region selected, and that is what is in, and everything else is our out. So let's just make some adjustments. I want this blue portion to show up in the beginning. So we're simply going to swap the placement in our color legend. So drag this down. Let's also add our table calculations. So copy over our sales to our label. And from here, drop down quick table calculation, percent of total. So perhaps we only want to see the proportion for a specific subcategory. So in here, we're going to compute using table across. And we're just going to format this so that we don't have too many decimal places. So on the drop down, format, and in here, percentage, 0 decimal places. And it's also just adjust the font. So under label, we're just going to make this a little bit smaller so it fits a little bit better inside our bars. Adjust this a little bit more, and let's set this to entire view. Close the formatting menu. One more thing we want to do before we set up our set actions and before we put this in our dashboard is we want to sort this based on the length of the bar. So to do this, we're going to create a calculated field. So on the sidebar, create calculated field. Let's call this selected region sales. So selected region sales. And in here, if region set, remember this is going to be a true or false right away, then we want to display just the sales. And then end. If it is not part of our region selection, it's simply just going to be null, therefore it's not going to have a value. So let's click on OK. And what we want to do is we want to be able to use this calculated field in our sort for our subcategory. So on the drop down of the subcategory pill, let's select sort. And in here, we're going to choose the field based on the calculated field that we just created. And we call this selected region sales. And it's going to be descending. So this is what happens right now. So let's place this in our dashboard. Let's put our region list at the very top, and we're going to get our stack bar chart or region proportion at the bottom of this list. Let's reformat this a little bit more. And in here, hide titles that we don't need. Make the top part just a lot smaller. And in here, readjust a little bit more. So after this, let us set up our actions. Right now, we are in a dashboard, so we are going to create our dashboard action. So dashboard actions, and it's going to be another action. So let's add change set values action. Let's call this region set action. Our source sheet is simply going to be the region list. So let's uncheck our region proportion, which is our stack bar chart, and our target set is going to be our region set. So click on region set right now. We're going to assign the values on select, as well as we're going to remove all the values from the set when we clear the selection. Let's click OK and then OK, and let's test this out. So right now, if I click on Central, it's not going to make any changes because that's our default value. However, once I click on East, it should make some adjustments, and also notice that the sorting is based on the proportion of the selected bars. It's not the overall length of the bar, but the only ones that are part of East. So let's click on this again, South as well as West. You're also noticing that as I click through, I'm seeing my tooltips. So sometimes what we want to do is we might want to just turn off the tooltips so it's not too confusing showing too many things at the same time. Let's go back to this worksheet. Under Tooltip, uncheck Show Tooltips. Let's click OK. Let's go back to our dashboard and let's test this again. 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we want to select multiple, we can just press Control and then click. So if we want both South and West, I'm going to press Control, select South as well. Now, all of these are now the combination of both South and West. The last use case is market basket analysis. Often we want to know which items, products, people are associated together. For example, in our case, we want to know which products are bought together and what is the frequency. Let's start by looking at our orders. So let's drag over our order ID. Let's also drag over our subcategory. We can see in here that in some orders, there's only one item or one subcategory that is being bought, but in others, there might be multiple subcategories. So again, this is our question. Which subcategories are bought together and what is the frequency or what is the proportion? For this example, we are going to need two sets, one for subcategory and the other one for order IDs. Let us start with subcategory first. So right-click on subcategory, create a set, and right now, let's just choose accessories. So click on accessories and then OK. So just by looking at the screen right now, it looks like we have a few of these orders that have accessories. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to determine which orders have accessories, and we need to be able to mark that order as a whole. So let's start this again slowly using some calculated fields. Eventually, we're going to use this within our order ID set, but let's create some simple calculated fields first. So on the drop-down, create calculated field. Let's just call this is subcategory in this order. It's going to be an if statement again. So if subcategory set, then right now we're simply going to display a 1 and then end. So let's click OK and let's move this up to our dimensions and let's display that. So in here, what we are seeing is any of the orders that have accessories, that is our currently selected subcategory, it is going to give us 1. However, if there are multiple subcategories in that same order, we're going to see some other items that are nulls. Now, because we want to mark order IDs as a whole, we want to take the collective results. So for example, this particular order, we have 4 subcategories. You have 1 null, null, null. What we want to do is we want to be able to just get the max value. So the maximum value, if we were to take this, the maximum value of all of these will be 1. And we want to use this when we compose another set based on order IDs. Again, all we want to do is to be able to display whether yes, the subcategory selected is in that order or it's not. So let's create another set right now based on order ID. So right click, create a set. And this time around, we're going to use a condition. So under condition, we're going to use a formula. And in here, we're simply going to say the max of our calculated field, we called it is subcategory in this order. Remember, this gives us either a 1 or a null. If the maximum of this is equal to 1, we want to mark this order ID as part of the set. Let's click OK, and let's just display this for visual confirmation. So in here, we can see that this particular order ID, it had a 1, but it marked pretty much the whole ID as part of the set. Same thing with the second one, you have all ins, but the other ones, because there is no 1 value, therefore the max is still going to be nulls for each one of these. It is going to be marked as out. Now let's put this in a chart. So in here, let's drag our subcategory Let's count all of our orders. So right-click, drag order ID onto columns, select count distinct of order IDs. And right now, let's just sort all the bars. And because we have order IDs in here, and we also have an order ID set, we can use this to show the proportion of the orders that have that particular subcategory that's selected. So let's take this, put this in our color. Let's swap our colors around. There's a couple more things we want to do. First, we want to remove the currently selected subcategory. And second is we want to sort based on the selection, the one that has the highest order ID counts. Let's start by removing the currently selected subcategory. Now recall that our sets, they only have two values, either in or out. And right now, the only selected value that we have is accessories. So technically, we should be able to use the subcategory set and only retain the ones that are not in the set right now. The only one that's currently selected is accessories, and we're just going to exclude this one and retain all the other subcategories that are currently not selected. Let's drag this over. By default, it will retain only the ones that are within the set. We can make some adjustments. On the drop-down, we're just going to simply say show in and out of set, and we're going to retain only the ones that are not selected. So click on OK, and that should have removed the currently selected subcategory. Let's create another calculated field. So on the drop-down, create calculated field, and let's call this the number of order IDs, number of selected order IDs. And this time we can use our order ID set. So if the order ID set, then we can display our order ID and then end, and we can just count all the distinct order IDs. So count D right there. After this, we are going to use this calculated field to sort our subcategory. Let's click OK. So on the drop down, sort. And it's going to be by field, and it's going to be based on the number of selected order IDs, and it's going to be descending. So let's set this all up in a dashboard, but before that, let's create a subcategory list where we're simply displaying all of our subcategories. We're going to use this as a selector in our dashboard, and then in our dashboard, let's display a list of our subcategories right here, and we're also going to display our proportions. Let's put that to the right, move this around, hide some of the titles. Let's set this to fit width right here. Maybe make some adjustments right there. Let's hide some of the other titles. Okay, let's add our action. So under dashboard actions, we are going to create another action. So add action, change set values. And in here, let's call this our subcategory set action. This is only going to come from our list, and we're going to target our subcategory set. And again, we're going to remove all values once we clear the selection. For this particular example, we are going to choose the single select only. We only want a single selection, and we want to analyze which other subcategories are bought with the one that we have selected. So single select only, and click OK. Now let's go back to this list. Let's disable the tooltip. So now let's test our dashboard. Let's click on appliances and art and binders, bookcases, chairs, and so forth. And that's it for this video. We reviewed sets and we looked at the mechanics and use cases for set actions. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you again next time.